All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's January 12th, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team while showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time as soon as we're done with this intro, and we'll jump into questions and answers and live conversation. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support our channel, hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just go over to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. Also, don't forget to share these videos with your team. It's a great way to keep everyone on the same page about what we're talking about. So with that said, let's kick it off with a few announcements. There's a few ones that were brought to my attention this week. We'll also turn it over, see if anyone else has some exciting announcements. The first one is a sad announcement. Matt Gowie called out another project to bite the dust. Okay, it hasn't bit the dust yet. I'm exaggerating, but it's a project. Anyone who's been working with like sealed secrets or Git secrets, Git crypted secrets, or sops operator, or sops, which has been around forever, it feels like now, call for new maintainers. So what that means, I don't know, but I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but it's almost like saying, imagine libcurl comes out and says, hey, we can't manage this project anymore. We're looking for maintainers, and the internet freaks out.
Yeah, that's bad, because sops is a great tool, and I hope that it doesn't die.
Yeah, like what we just refound love with it, because like we've been helping customers using it together with the sops operator for Kubernetes.
Yep.
And it's a great way where you can just have Git encrypted secrets, but that are the whole file's not encrypted, so you can still get line by line level diffs when you have a pull request. So it's not totally that's changing.
Yeah, where I find it to be the most important is that in order to have a single source of truth for when you're trying to instantiate something, for instance, a cluster, it's a great place to be able to store encrypted secrets in a YAML file to be able to hydrate your environment. Otherwise, you have a cyclical or an issue where it's what's the word I'm looking for? Inception problem with trying to figure out how to...
Yeah, circular dependencies, right?
Circular dependencies, yeah. So it's a really great place because typically you're going to use GitHub as your source of truth. So sops is great to be able to store your encrypted secrets in GitHub where your source of truth exists, and being able to do infrastructure as code from GitHub, which is what you typically do. Sops is a really perfect tool for that.
Yeah. And just expanding on what you said is the ability then to promote that. You can make the change in one pull request and then promote it to every environment, and the secrets get updated as needed in each environment as they go. Versus this, how do you get them updated in each environment? That becomes an out-of-band process that is seldom answered as part of the CICD story.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and SOPs has some lesser known features and integrations with things like HashiCorp Vault and other technologies that allow you to basically mimic, replicate, or replace like Ansible Vault and things like that, and en masse if you use the right constructs. It's kind of neat. So it's surprising to see that they're dropping.
I would like to reiterate that I know that you were sounding a bit dramatic, because it's not like the project's dead. There's nothing fermenting. So hopefully there's some interest in this, because I would hate to see this go somewhere where it just dies. I'm hopeful. This seems like it's a really big project, so I don't see
9,000 stars almost on GitHub.
I mean, it's well used. You got the sops operator, you've got Helm and Helm file, both use it exclusively. So I'm pretty sure there will be some interest in this. If I had time, I would jump on it. I think like anybody else, I'm overworked. So
well, where I'm at, it's being used to single-handedly allow them to get fix Ansible Vault rotation, key rotation issues that they're going to get dinged for in different reports. You know, in order for them to get around that, they've shifted it to the back end of Vault, and they're just using sops to do it and mask for a bunch of Kubernetes secrets for their current deployment. That's not how it's going to stay permanently, but I mean, there's just some good integrations. So.
All right. Next announcement. One of our partners, Spacelift, has announced that they're introducing a new podcast. Don't know too much about it. Just was in my news feed. It relates to some other topics that we often talk about. Spacelift is one of the many taco providers, Terraform automation collaboration software in the same category as M0, Terraform Cloud, and Scalar. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Another one is near and dear to my heart, Atmos. We're continuously investing in this project in Cloud Posse. We use it in every one of our commercial engagements, and we're seeing a large uptick in adoption all around in different organizations. So it's really cool to see that. Atmos is a fresh take on how to run tools like Terraform, Helmfile. We're going to be adding support for Packer and other tools as they enter into our periphery. Now, what's really special about Atmos is the insane level of configuration that we've introduced with YAML without it being, I think, overwhelming to end users. So in the examples here, you'll see an example of how we do it. Like we conceptually implement configurations in terms of various components. You can define your default configuration, for example, for a VPC, but we just introduced the ability now to do multiple inheritance in this as well. So we always supported this ability in Atmos to now be able to import configurations in mass. So you can create very dry configurations and build new environments just by importing configurations around like this that get deep merged. But now we added support for inherits. So let me open up this pull request. And why that's cool is you can now define one of your components here and then inherit configuration from any other number of sources to dry up your configuration further and pull it all together for what you're implementing here. Why that's interesting is you might want to pull in some defaults for operating in US West 2 versus US East 1 or something, or you wanted to have different overrides for your Datadog monitors for different environments. And you can implement like conceptually something very similar to mixins in this way in your configuration. What's really important to point out here is that there are many other tools in the market, right, that do similar things. There's obviously TerraGrunt, but it's only for Terraform. There is a deprecated tool by Uber called Astro. There's countless other tools that have taken a YAML-based approach, but very few have this concept of being able to dry up your configurations by deep merging and doing imports. There's going to be a lot of other exciting extensions to what we're doing with Atmos this year. I can't wait to talk about, but I'm going to keep them under wraps for right now.
So do you use that as a CICD tool? Is that the idea?
It's not a tool, for example, to replace CICD. It's a tool you would run inside of CICD.
Within CICD is what I'm asking. So that it would kind of drive the integration portion, it seems. Or maybe the deployment portion.
More the deployment portion. Here's the problem we're solving. You have lots of Terraform modules, lots of Terraform root modules, so the top level modules. And you have lots of environments. And you want to provision those modules any number of times in any number of accounts. And if you're a company like us, we don't even know what those combinations of configurations are going to be, because we work with so many different customers with different architectures. So what we wanted to do was create very reusable Terraform modules that work for basically any organization, and very reusable configuration that works for any organization. And we wanted to be able to define the configuration in a very dry manner, where we set like global organization defaults, we set production defaults, we set product level defaults. And then we want all of that just to inherit appropriately to the VPC, to the EKS clusters, and so forth. We wanted to distill kind of separate configuration from business logic, where your Terraform modules are really the business logic, how you implement EKS, versus configuration is how you want EKS configured. Like, how big should it be? How many regions? I'm sorry, how many zones? How many, what are the subnets? All those things would be configuration. And when you keep those separate and you keep those in YAML, amazing things or opportunities come up, because now anything that reads YAML, anything that writes YAML can become part of this tightly integrated ecosystem with Terraform. We have some under tutorials. We have some examples.
Eric?
Yep.
About this, have you looked at Hocon as a configuration language?
No, we haven't. I think you pointed this out. How was it spelled?
Hocon, I think.
Let me refresh my memory here.
Yeah, Hocon, H-O-C-O.
Did I mention that before? Okay, I didn't remember.
I think I saw it recently in Slack. I think
TIBCO Hocon, is that what you're looking at?
TIBCO is a curse word in some places I've worked at.
It looks a lot
Actually
like
very.
If that's what I think it looks like HCL. It looks exactly like HCL.
Yeah, exactly. It's very reminiscent of HCL. It was uncanny when I saw it.
Yeah.
A colleague brought it to my attention, and I thought, wow, that's pretty weird.
I think there's some design constraints that were integral into what we were doing, that we want this never to morph into a language. We want it never to morph into what had to happen with Terraform. That Terraform went from, not having iterators, not having, well, okay, it had variables pretty early, but some of the more advanced features that everybody who used it ultimately demanded. And I agree, it was probably the right choice for Terraform, just like it was probably the right choice for Helm file to have all of that. But at some point you need axioms like constants, like truths, and you can't have layers of variables on variables and functions that generate things that at all different things. The idea, the design consideration with what we're trying to achieve with Atmos is constants. These are fully declarative, exactly what you want. If you want anything else that's not dynamic enough, it's not our fault. It's your implementation that's not dynamic enough. Make your components more dynamic, make your Helm files more dynamic. But what we're trying to define are clearly the declarative inputs without any iterators and functions or modules or things like that.
Yeah, you'll find that the argument between declarative and imperative paradigms is basically become a holy war.
Yeah.
The people who say that, well, if you're going to do imperative, do fully imperative. If you're going to do declarative, you need to set up your stuff right to do declarative, and declarative is / better than imperative.
I would say is if you're not going to do declarative, do all of your imperative work to make things declarative.
Yeah, but the problem is that you got people who either don't know how to do that or are really good at being able to identify why they don't want to do it that way. So that's why Terraform ran into the SOP they did. They came out with a declarative form of HCL, and they said this is how it's got to be done, and they lost that war. And now they can do imperative. There's some imperative stuff within the language itself. Helm file with Helm, you see it everywhere. And eventually what ends up happening is imperative it wins. The only place where that hasn't been an issue yet is
it wins because we can't do everything declaratively yet.
That's right.
Yeah, well,
yes.
So Kubernetes has remained declarative, and I don't think it's going to not ever be. It's always going to be declarative. And there's some really good conversations.
But Helm fixes that, right?
Well, yeah, and customize and all the things, but yeah, it's just an interesting argument. It's an interesting conversation to have, I think, is probably the way I want to put it. And so I appreciate that you guys are trying to do a completely declarative method for this. I wonder how long it's going to remain that way. That's all I can say.
Well, and the reason I brought up Håkon is because it's exactly, Eric, what you were saying. It is purely declarative. There is no, as far as I know, there's no functional constructs, imperative constructs. The reason it's nice is because it's basically the declarative portion of HCL. It has the nice, clean, handling of braces and, quotes, which, tends to add noise. And you can define constants, and that's about it. Right? You can define constants in your YAML that you use in different places, so you're not stuck using what do they call it in YAML, anchors or whatever. So yeah, it's just something to look at some point.
If you really want to take it to the next level, look at Quelang, Queuelang. It's a bonkers config language that will bend your mind backwards. So
how do you spell it again? What?
Queuelang.
So could I take a step backwards and ask a dumb question, which is, is Atmos, is this, help me understand how it works. Is this like a templating tool?
No.
That executes certain things, or how does this work?
No, it's not templating by design. It is strictly a way to manage really all of your settings in a kind of inheritance type of setting. Now, if you're one of those people that
is it an environment schema?
Yeah, like an environment schema would be a good way of describing it. Now, there is so much hate around object-oriented programming. It's fine. And we are actually borrowing a lot of object-oriented concepts in what we're doing. So it will not appeal to people who have a very
strong opinion
on that. Yeah, thank you. So, but it's played, all I can say is it's played out very well for us in how we are thinking about it. And part of my hesitation in the end on some of these other esoteric choices, what I'm going to call esoteric, I'm not saying they're esoteric necessarily, but like what we were just talking with the Håkon or Queuelang or things like that, we started with that. That was our root. We started with a very esoteric language called Variant 2, which was this basically highly declarative way in an HCL format to describe your workflow across all of these tools, a modern task runner, if you will, for all of these things. And we pushed that to the limit. And I massively, massively regretted it. All I wanted was something that was super simple to understand, just flat out freaking YAML. And that's why we ended up moving away from this. And we did a complete rewrite of Atmos into Golang, native Golang. Now, Variant itself was in Golang, but we wanted to cut that out. So I'm hoping what we have is just a very opinionated, purpose-built schema for defining environments the way at least all the tools that we use need it. It's interesting because at the same time, what is it? HashiCorp has come out with Waypoint. You could kind of say we are in competition with Waypoint, but we're not. I would say that we would be a plugin for Waypoint, if that makes sense. And Waypoint would be a way of delivering Atmos in that case.
I'm sorry for the ignorant question around Atmos, but does it also help you generate / create the pipelines and projects that, no?
No, okay. Not yet, but these are the things that we have in the works. So if you look at many of the most popular frameworks out there, they have generators and they're able to generate your fixtures. They're able to generate boilerplate new methods and modules and components and things like that. That's what we want to tackle with Atmos this year to tighten the integration in how we do everything. There's very frequent patterns with these things that have evolved. Patterns like generators. Lots of people use cookie cutter, for example. If you look at most successful languages, they have registries of some form. We're talking Python has PyP, Docker has Docker Hub or Docker Registry. All of these things are directions we want to take Atmos.
I'm sorry, I still fail to properly situate Atmos in my lexicon of tools. So I'm trying to understand.
What are some tools you use?
I mean, for example, like Terraform and GitHub Actions and like in the release.
Tower? Wouldn't this be like? Would you do a comparison to Ansible Tower on something like this?
I would say it's more. I would say it's closer to. So if you're not familiar with Uber Astro, that's one thing to look at.
Oh yeah, that's kind of neat.
Uber Astro is a very simple YAML format. You define all of your components and their path, and then you define the dependency or relationship between those components. Astro was designed specifically for Terraform and only supports Terraform as a model or framework. There is, everyone knows TerraGrunt, of course. TerraGrunt is a tool for configuration to dry up your Terraform code. It's written in Golang, but supports a HCL-based configuration format. Again, only supports Terraform. There are, there's like 3 or 4 other frameworks out there for managing Terraform. What's the other one I'm saying? TerraSpace. TerraSpace is very similar as well. So TerraSpace is a framework also just for Terraform, how to manage your configuration into modules and stacks, and has the concept of basically generators, generating new stacks and things like that. But it has the downside that if you're not a Ruby shop, this probably doesn't appeal to you because you have to install Ruby in the kitchen sink to operate it. There's Bin Bash has their product called Leverage, I think it's called. So Leverage is the same kind of thing. You define your configurations perhaps in YAML. They implemented their solution in Python. So there are tons of similar examples. I would say the consistency with all of us is we're trying to solve how do you configure things and run commands
without having to use Ruby.
Without having to use Ruby, Python, or Ansible,
Python
or Chef, or
sucks.
things like that.
Ruby's great. That's
what do you mean? Ruby's the worst.
I love
them fighting words.
No, basically, if you started with Ruby, you're like Ruby diehard for the rest of your life. Man,
I started with Perl.
Really?
All right, thread jackers. Let's get back on topic.
I know lots of languages. So. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I would say that the trend of lots of projects these days is to gravitate towards YAML configuration. Here's to you, Kubernetes, and CloudFormation, even you could argue. Just I vomit if I look at CloudFormation and how that works. And
does Pulumi land in the same place here too?
No, definitely not. No. So here's the thing. It's more like, okay, so you depend on Helm file. I know that based on your questions. Many people depend on Helm file, Kubernetes, kubectl, and several other tools. All of them need some basic level of configuration. Even if you're using Helm file, you have your Helm values. How are you managing that? And how are you drying that up? And then you have, if you're using that together with Terraform, you have all your Terraform environments. And then you're using Packer. And where are you managing all your Packer configurations? And the depth that you can inherit variables and override things and configure things in Packer is different from Terraform, is different from Helm, is different from Helm file, is different from Kubernetes, is different. It differs in all of these. And what we're trying to do is unify how we define the configuration in the form of these catalogs of configuration, and then build integrations in Atmos so we can run Atmos for Terraform, we can run Atmos for Packer, we can run Atmos for Helm file, but we can keep very dry configurations in YAML that follow the same structure. It's aspirational and it's definitely opinionated. It definitely won't work for most companies who have existing infrastructure designed in a way that wasn't built like this from the ground up. But it's entirely congruent with our model in how we design all of our ecosystem and modules. So if you look at Terraform AWS components, for example, this is how we design all of our Terraform root modules. Now, these root modules here that we've upstreamed, many of them are pretty out of date, but we'll look at one here that's more up to date, like Global Accelerator. If we look at Global Accelerator, the way we define our modules is that they leverage a lot of our Cloud Posse open source, but that the root module is your organization's most opinionated implementation of that module. It's what's not going to change necessarily when our module updates. It's how you get your remote state. It's how you get your VPC information. It's how you get your subnets. It's how you get your secrets and parameter store. All of that stuff is going to vary based on how you do operations at your company. And what we want you to do is define a standard interface to a component, and then have that component call our modules, which are opinionated, but much less opinionated. Now, if you design all of your infrastructure this way, if you think about how you design your Helm files, you do it this way. You think about how you do your components, your Terraform root modules this way. Then what you do is you build a library of building blocks. And then we have this library of building blocks. Now we need a library of configuration. We need a library of all your settings. And that's what we're trying to solve with Atmos. Yeah, I think I need to work on the cold start pitch here to make it more accessible to folks new to the problems that we're solving. And that was very helpful.
Maybe some demos. Some demos.
Be worthy of a separate
demos are what we are way overdue for. So that is a New Year's resolution for anybody who got our newsletter. That is our New Year's resolution, to do more demos. Don't have the demos today.
Yeah, I was not aware of Atmos, but it looks like something that I might need to take a look at, because I am in the process of moving my environment from the traditional. I started out back in 2008 in AWS doing everything manually to now doing everything in Terraform and starting it all fresh in a new environment.
This would be definitely worth taking a look at least kicking the tires. And if you do want to check out like some docs to get started, we do have under docs.cloudposse.com a tutorial on Atmos and getting started with it, a very simple example. You can, and what's nice about it is it's leveraging Geodesic under the hood, which is our toolbox. So you need no local dependencies other than Docker just to get started playing with this stuff.
I need to look at Geodesic as well. I've seen that you mentioned, but I haven't looked at it much.
Exactly. So that's a perfect segue into the other announcement. It's just a minor one, more exciting to people already using our tool chain. I thought we'd merged it already, but it'll probably merge any minute now. Just a very minor fix so that when you start Geodesic, what's nice, so one thing about Geodesic is this toolbox, right? Like if you used Fedora toolbox or the back in the day, the Core OS toolbox, which is kind of what gave us the inspiration of having this toolbox, is that when you start it, you want the toolbox to start relative to your current working path, so that when you're inside this container, it's as though you're natively working on your MacBook or Linux workstation or Windows workstation, but within this container. So that's what's coming here, is that when you start Geodesic, it'll just be relative. Can you guys hear me okay? My audio just changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Changed for the better.
Yeah, there was a lot of background noise a minute ago.
There was a lot of background noise.
I think someone had an open mic that was picking up a lot of audio.
Yeah, that must have been it. I found myself talking higher and higher and higher. All right.
Was it me?
I think it's you actually, Jeremy.
Okay, I'll fix it. Thanks.
Or Jim. Oh, was it Jim? Yes, it was you, Jim. Sorry. Yeah.
It was me because I heard the hot mic, but
yeah, no, it was not you. Yeah, it was Jim. Yeah.
Oh, another Jim. Okay.
Oh yeah, not that Jim. Yeah, it's Jim Park, not Jim Connor.
Oh, good.
Right. I was gonna say I don't think it's mine, because I've got mine running through a bunch of VST plugins to trim the sound out.
That's pretty cool.
That sounds good.
All right. So finally, we get to some talking points posted by our community here. Let's jump into the first one. Sharif, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on.
Awesome. So let's see what you're asking here. All right. Talking point for today's Q&A, how to automate granting IAM permissions to different teams in a growing company. So is this company an enterprise or a startup? And how large is the company?
Yeah, we are going from this startup phase to the like a medium company, but we are hiring a lot, and there is a lot of people joining, and it's getting like a bit of a hassle to give everyone their IAM permissions and their services too. Okay.
And let's take a step back, or let's continue going through here. So you're using Terraform today to define your IAM roles and SSO roles with permission sets. That's good. Your company has been growing fast with many services created by many teams moving forward. We have a new extra security requirements that require least privileged access to everything. We got overwhelmed with requests when every new service was created. Although having infrastructure as code helps, it's slow to require knowledge of someone who wanted to contribute an open and pull request. And we can't, and we also can't give our CICD full IAM access yet. So Terraform for IAM is currently applied from computers. I was thinking if there's a local tool to manage this IAM in some way, and users and teams can request those permissions, and admins and security engineers can approve that, and so forth. Okay, well, let's break this down, because you have some specific requirements that prevent you from maybe doing some of our best practices or recommendations. And I'd like to start with what I consider more the current state of the art, not that it's state of the art, but current state of our trade. And then how we can specifically address your situation and why I think that's a slippery slope and a rabbit hole. So fundamentally, I like this idea now that when you're practicing GitOps, that you get away from thinking that engineers even need really any access to any environments at all, other than some trusted SREs and support engineers. And then you have a sandbox account or set of sandbox accounts where everyone is admin. Why do I like this? Well, it's very cognitively simple. You're not getting in the way of developers. You have an account which has no critical information or access to cardholder data or PII, etc. You can always nuke it when you need to. And then for all of your pristine accounts, you are practicing sound GitOps, not with locally applied Terraform, but it's going through a continuous delivery process. Now, not all continuous delivery processes are the same. And if you are just using turnkey off-the-shelf GitHub Actions or Jenkins or Circle CI, you're going to be in for a world of hurt trying to create more policy-driven capabilities of who can do what at what times. This is why these modern tools exist. If you look back on our past recordings for the taco providers, we talk about M0, Spacelift, Scalar, and I feel like I sound like a broken record when I talk about these things, but this is why they exist, because it is very non-trivial to manage permissions for continuous delivery for Terraform. There's two problems here. One is there's three problems here, I would say. One is you have your services that you deploy to AWS. They need fine-grained IAM access controls, no doubt. That service should be only allowed to access the S3 buckets that it needs to access, right to the S3 buckets that it needs to access. Your CICD system, on the other hand, needs a different type of fine-grained access control. It's called admin. And it's literally needs to be able to do anything, because to do anything in AWS, including provision IAM, you really need to be an admin. So that's why it's a non-starter to start thinking about how are we going to do Terraform on the workstation and do fine-grained IAM access controls for our developers. You aren't. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to create more AWS accounts with finer-grained scopes, and you're going to define roles, and developers will be associated with those roles in groups, and that's going to determine kind of like, what they can or cannot do, which is basically nothing. you're going to give them probably a view-only level scope and permission in most accounts.
Yeah, people like developers are not the problem. Mostly the services itself, like
the services themselves. Okay,
yeah,
that's a good one. So how do we solve that one? Well, you're a regular here on office hours, so I know you've done your research and things like that. But for everyone else who hasn't, I mean, there are more than a few tools, including even one by Amazon, IAM, AWS IAM Access Analyzer. And I believe there's a CLI for this that will help you define the policies now. But I don't have it handy. And there's more than a few that work this way. Basically, you run your operation. Yeah. And that's not working for you.
To figure out the IAM permissions that the service already need or already uses. But the thing is, like, new services and new feature require extra permissions. So I'm not able to automate it yet. So I was trying to figure out if anyone figured it out, or doing it in a way that's more automated.
So I would like to take it back to what we were talking about earlier a little bit, and your job as a platform team, and also not getting in the way of your developers. So I understand what you're saying. I understand that you have more and more people active on the platform, more and more people contributing Terraform code, harder to review all the IAM policies and make sure everything's kosher. Get it. And that will, at any scale, that will ultimately be, at a certain scale, that will inevitably become a problem. But can we defer that problem until later by thinking about things more as these building blocks? So if you take it back to your team is responsible for defining the building blocks of the services that you have as best practices, and that your team is therefore leveraging those. So there's very little original Terraform.
Man, just a thought. I'll throw a thought out there because I like where you're going with this. So one of the things that we do, and I'm certainly not suggesting everybody does this, but one of the things that we do, two points that we do here that I think are important, is that one, we use sub accounts in AWS so that we have a primary account that has certain global aspects about things. And then anytime we need to do anything within other certain accounts, then we assume role to those accounts. And then the other thing that we do in one of our environments that we're getting ready to deploy across our fleets is we're not using AWS SSO yet, we're using Okta. But one of the things that really helps out with that account management is that we have another place where the accounts and groups live. And then we use an SSO with SAML to be able to get gain the access that we need to our AWS environment. So effectively, we don't have any users in our AWS accounts.
But just to scope this back, though, remember what Sharif is really, Sharif is really asking, which I didn't interpret correctly, was how do you do it specifically for services deployed, capturing the minimum IAM permissions for your EKS cluster, so to say, or for your Redis cluster, or for this thing that's going to write to S3. How do you capture that in a more idiot-proof way? So a developer who, look, I hate it. It's powerful, but who likes writing it? And how do you expect a new person to AWS to figure out these IAM rules, especially as soon as they figure out the star operator? It's like, yeah, star, S3 : star, done, did it, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like my old boss.
Yeah. We are using SSO for permissions. It's helpful for this, but for services, it is that we can't automate it. And in a perfect world, we will have like a really consistent naming pattern for everything, for the old and new stuff.
Yeah, so you need a consistent naming thing, use tagging, and another thing we use very heavily is IRSA. so that we can, and I don't know if you're using Kubernetes, that's really only relevant to Kubernetes, but if you're using Kubernetes, IRSA is really nice.
Yeah. We're using IRSA.
Well, and it's also a good point in the sub accounts with, if you've got your lower environments where the development is going on with the new features in that, that's maybe where you could go ahead and you could leave the IAM open and then do the analysis against that environment, or maybe do the analysis against maybe the QA or the UAT environment just above that, where the development's not going on, but you're actually doing your integration testing on it, see what the accesses are being at, do the analysis against that, and then use that for your upper production environment deployment rollout.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But yeah, I had a boss that he had problems with permissions, so he just chmoded the directory 777.
I hate that. I hate that.
All right, Bridge Crew.
The fun thing about this is that there's no one way to do it, and that's the hard thing about it, is that given whatever situation you're currently in, it's really, really sometimes very complicated to come away with a really solid way of being able to accomplish your goal.
I forgot about IAM. I remember when that first came out.
Yeah, there's been it's a hot topic as everyone's getting more sophisticated in what they're trying to do. K9 was the other one. K9 specializes in AWS security. I know they had a product as well, I think.
K9 or K9S?
K9 security.
Oh, K9, yeah, I think that's right. I have to look into that more.
I have a question actually before we move on. Do you like give your CICD systems IAM full access to create IAM role? Like,
absolutely.
I don't feel safe about it. Like
you're not going to get.
You're not giving Jenkins admin access to your AWS infrastructure, huh?
No, to be honest, I need to add anything. I have to like give it like very small.
How else is your CICD process to be able to deploy anything if it's restricted itself? I mean, the thing is that your CICD, it's all audited, it's all version controlled, or should be. So you can actually keep track, you know exactly what it is. And in my case, I prefer to have my CICD have admin access, and I give myself more of a read-only access personally, because that way I'm forcing everything to try and go through the automation.
And you still need to follow the least privileges paradigm with CICD, but usually depending on what you're deploying with it, it has to have the access to be able to do it.
Yeah, I give it the access, but the thing is, like, whenever I'm adding like a new feature or using a new resource, I have to like go back to its IAM role and update it. And it's a very bad process, because like whenever I apply Terraform, like it failed for this permission and I fix it, then I fail for this next permission and I fix it. Yeah. And it's
because you could still give it admin access and then put a boundary rules against it that basically say exactly what you do not want it to be able to do.
Yeah.
Well, one other paradigm is like if you have your CI and it only has permission to do the one thing that it needs, like deploy an image, and say it hits ECR, and then you have CloudWatch rules that look at ECR, and that triggers another pipeline or another process that has permission to do the admin level stuff. That's another way to kind of, keep your CI permission limited.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
What we do is we separate, we have basically 3 patterns that we advise our customers on. And option 1 is what we've been typically doing, but are starting to move away from, and I'll show you what that is. But basically, we deploy the runners with an IAM service account that allows admin in every single account, except for the root, audit, and security accounts, because that violates the trust capabilities. So the downside with this is we have no ability to do continuous delivery to those accounts when we do that. So the evolution of this is we are going more with option 3 now, which is we enable a read-only role in every single account, an admin in every account other than those 3 I told you about, the root account, the security account, and audit account. And this allows us with our tooling to get drift detection when there's any changes in those environments, but we have to go manually apply it as an human operator. And in every other environment, we get continuous delivery hands-free. Now, the way I want it to work is very clear. And I want to give admin everywhere. And I want to require MFA in those 3 accounts I was telling you about. But our tooling, the platform, Spacelift in this case, and I don't know of any platform that would support this, needs to stop, prompt, and wait for MFA. The reason why I want this and the reason why I don't want the unadulterated admin in the root account is for the worst case black swan scenario. I am at a conference, I am at work, I'm on a call, I am asleep, and something is happening when my attention is not there. And for like account destruction, yeah, no, don't want that automated. All right, we are almost out of time. Let's see here. Well, this is a really quick one I'll just get to. It was just answered. It was asked in our community this past week, and it's a very simple answer. So my theory on why there's no more JSON to HCL tools is because you don't need them, and that in Terraform you can just write programmatically JSON code in any Terraform module, root module, child module, and it will just work. And I argue that this is a good thing, that it's ugly JSON code because it was machine generated and you shouldn't go edit it. And by having it in JSON, it's clear that this was not developed by humans. Kind of like when you disassemble a application, you get this garbage code that nobody wants to edit. Has anybody seen a JSON to HCL2 for HCL2? I haven't seen one.
I try to stay as far away from HCL as possible, so no.
Okay. Are you going Pulumi then, or are you
no, I mean,
just
we use it.
Contrarian on infrastructure as code?
Not more contrarian, I guess. We have to use it.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Technically, I don't know if I want to say this. I have a love-hate relationship with it. Let's just put it that way. But if I had to either write JSON or write HCL, that's a tough one, actually. So I said something a few years ago that unfortunately, if there was a better way to do things than YAML, JSON, or any other serialized form language, I would definitely do it. English to be the best way, but unfortunately, that doesn't exist yet. So you have to adopt one of them. And in my mind, I think YAML is probably the easiest to read. So that's what I stick with.
All right. Yeah, no, so I mean, there's so many options these days. I have serious FOMO on Pulumi. I'll say it there. I said it. Okay, now back to Terraform. Let's cover the next question. Should our teams avoid using Terraform to configure Datadog monitors? This was asked by you this week. It was a very hot topic in the chat, so I thought it would be a good one to bring up here. Jim? Do you want to give your firsthand? Well, it hurts to start with only 8 minutes left on such a big topic, but do you think we can add anything in 8 minutes, or should we start this one next week instead?
I feel like it's going to be one of those things where there's multiple dimensions, and it was great to have this conversation. So let me say this: thank you so much for your input into this thread. It was a really great conversation. I learned quite a few things, and one of the things that became clear out of that conversation is that when it comes to choice of how you use infrastructure as code as a whole, as a rule, right? Yeah. There is a trade-off. There's a balance to be made, and one of those balances is, takes into consideration how liquid do I want this this implementation to be. What's my team size? Like, who are we talking about? What processes are we changing here? Yeah. There's many considerations, and there's some advantages to using infrastructure code. And one of those things that was clear was that repeatability and assurance of integrity is one of those key advantages that you want to take into account to balance. So
and there's a boundary. up to a certain point. And so I wanted to say, like, we're provisioning Opsgenie with Terraform now. We did everything up until schedules. We could Terraform the schedules, but by design, we didn't, because the end user of this is going to be a manager who wants to drag and drop schedules around and people around. And we didn't want to have that in Terraform for that reason. That'd be abusive to the manager, I think.
Right.
So
ergonomics is key. I'll never forget what one of my engineering directors told me. Her name's Elizabeth Warren, not Warren, Elizabeth Hendrickson. She's written a couple books, but she's great. But she told me her entire job is to think and consider feedback loops. Like how do people make changes to the systems at play? So if I put the feedback loop frame on, and consider like my choices of technology and how to implement a process, then it really helps for me to frame how what's the appropriate technique to apply here, so that the people have the right tools and the best capabilities to do what they need to do. So this conversation was very illuminating. I think we could talk about it for. What
was the outcome? Any update on your email? Because you said you had hey guys, I just sent this email looking for your feedback, and I'm just curious what the reception was internally.
I mean, it's not surprising. Engineers, myself included, want to automate to the nines. But sometimes the UX actually doesn't call for that. The user experience isn't
and the investment
needed isn't actually
just doesn't call for it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a really what we were doing was that we were doing what engineers do. Was like, hey, we saw a problem. There's something we could dry up, and so we dried it up. But it wasn't appropriate to actually dry it up because it actually made it more complex to do so. And ultimately was not better for the people involved. So yeah, we're it's a balance to strike, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, these are some good other questions. We'll cover them next week since we didn't get to them, including yours, Oliver. I know you asked it in the Slack, not for office hours, but I think that I think there's something to be said here to kind of enlighten everyone on, like, there's a time and place for a tool. And even like, I think, Jim, you were asking about Helm file, and Jim Connor, and where we're at with that in our strategy, and time and place. So let's talk about Helm file, Ansible, Terraform next week on our office hours, and put it all into perspective.
I'll have to miss next week because I'll be in the middle of the Caribbean.
So I don't feel too sorry for you on that one.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Do you have your Starlink? No.
No, I'm still on the wait list.
Me too.
Seriously.
All right. So if everyone hasn't yet subscribed, please do go to youtube.com/Cloud Posse. Every subscriber helps us get closer to our goal of being able to maximize our usage on YouTube. And we have our office hours invitation. If you go to cloudposse.com/office hours, you'll get an invite in your calendar and a reminder every week that we have office hours starting. We have our Slack team. It's where we converse all about office hours, as well as Terraform, Kubernetes, AWS, all that jazz. Head over to slack.cloudposse.com to do that. And do hit me up on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Osterman. I love to stay in touch with what everyone's up to. Take care, everyone. See you all next week. Same place, same time.
Thanks again, Eric.
Anytime, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yep.